Mom finally rewarded the child who mattered. Ethan leaned toward me as the attorney closed the will, keeping his voice low enough that only I could hear. His expensive watch flashed beneath his cuff as he settled back into his chair, wearing the satisfied smile of a man who had already won. I stared at the papers on the attorney's desk. My brother had inherited everything. Our mother's mansion, her investment accounts, the commercial properties, and controlling interests in the businesses our grandfather had built, all valued at nearly $28 million. And to Natalie Carter, the attorney continued carefully, your mother leaves ownership and responsibility for her cat, Oliver, along with his personal belongings. An assistant placed a faded pet carrier beside my chair. Oliver's gray face appeared behind the wire door, his cloudy eyes fixed on me. That was it. Ethan received an empire. I received an elderly cat. A few relatives shifted uncomfortably, but no one challenged him. They had seen me drive Mom to chemotherapy, organize her medication, prepare her meals, and sleep beside her hospital bed. Ethan had appeared twice during her final year, both times with excuses about business meetings. Yet he was now the grieving son everyone congratulated. Ethan stood and buttoned his jacket. I'll handle the properties immediately. Mom trusted me to protect what she built. Then he looked at the carrier. You should be grateful, he said. Oliver probably suits your budget better than a mansion. A few people lowered their eyes. I picked up the carrier before anyone could see my hands shaking. The attorney opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. We're finished here. Outside, rain struck the pavement as I carried Oliver to my small house. I kept hearing Ethan's words, wondering what I had done to make Mom erase me after I had cared for her until her final breath. But the moment I stepped inside, Oliver began clawing violently at the carrier. Easy, I whispered, opening the door. He rushed past me, ignored his food bowl, and ran down the hallway toward the storage room I had not entered in years. Oliver scratched at the locked door, crying louder each time I tried to pull him away. I found the old key in a kitchen drawer, but it would not turn. Then I noticed fresh scratches around the lock. Someone had changed it. Oliver pressed his body against the door and let out a desperate howl. I tightened my hand around the useless key and stared at the room my mother had kept locked. What could possibly be inside? I wedged a flat screwdriver between the door and the frame and pushed until the wood split near the lock. The door swung inward with a sharp crack. Dust drifted through the narrow beam of hallway light. The room smelled of cedar, old paper, and the lavender sachets Mom kept in every closet. Boxes were stacked neatly against the walls, each labeled in her handwriting. Childhood photographs, school records, family letters. Oliver slipped past my ankles before I could stop him. He moved slowly now, but with purpose, crossing the room toward an old cedar chest beneath the window. What are you looking for? I whispered. He jumped onto the lid and scratched at it. Inside, I found photographs I had never seen. Mom holding me after my first day of school. Mom sitting beside me at my college graduation. Mom asleep in a hospital chair while I rested my head against her shoulder. Beneath them were journals. I opened one near the end. Natalie stayed again tonight. Ethan called for 3 minutes and asked whether I had reviewed the property documents. My throat tightened. Another entry read. She thinks I do not notice what she gives up for me. I notice everything. That did not sound like a woman who wanted to erase me from her life. Oliver pawed at the bottom of the chest. I lifted the remaining journals and found a cream-colored envelope taped beneath them. On the front, Mom had written, "Only if Oliver brings you here." My fingers shook as I opened it. A small brass key slid into my palm, followed by a single folded page. Before I could read it, I noticed a black metal case hidden under the chest. I pulled it out and tried the brass key, but it did not fit. The case required a 4-digit combination. I unfolded Mom's letter. Natalie, If you are reading this, do not confront your brother. Not yet. Everything depends on what you do next. I looked toward the doorway, half expecting Ethan to be standing there. At the bottom of the letter, one final sentence had been underlined twice. If you're reading this, Ethan has already done exactly what I feared. 3 days later, Ethan was already behaving as though our mother's legacy belonged to him alone. Luxury cars lined the driveway of the family mansion as real estate agents, financial advisors, and potential buyers walked through rooms that still smelled like Mom's perfume. Her favorite roses were blooming outside, yet Ethan spoke only about market value and closing dates. "List the lake house first," he told an agent. "It's the easiest sale." I stood near the back of the room, clutching Mom's letter inside my purse. Every word echoed in my mind. Do not confront your brother. So I stayed quiet. One of my aunts smiled at Ethan. Your mother would be proud of how responsibly you're handling everything. He accepted the compliment without hesitation. No one mentioned that I had been the one paying Mom's household bills during her illness or sleeping beside her hospital bed almost every night. When the meeting shifted to the investment portfolio, Ethan finally noticed me. I wasn't aware this was open to spectators, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. Several relatives turned toward me. I came because I have questions, I answered calmly. He laughed. Questions? Natalie, you spent years playing nurse. That doesn't make you qualified to understand a $28 million estate. A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the room. I wasn't asking about money, I replied. I found documents that suggest Mom may have intended something very different. The room fell silent. For the first time since the reading of the will, Ethan's smile disappeared. What documents? He asked sharply. I haven't finished reviewing them. His eyes narrowed. I hope you're not planning to invent stories because you're disappointed. I don't need to invent anything. The attorney sitting beside him looked down at his notes instead of meeting my eyes. The tension broke only when the meeting adjourned. As relatives drifted outside, an elderly man touched my elbow. Natalie. I turned and recognized Mr. Harold Green, the family's accountant. He had worked with my mother for over 30 years. Walk with me, he said quietly. We crossed into the garden, where no one else could hear us. Your mother expected today, he admitted. What do you mean? Months before she passed away, she instructed me never to destroy certain financial records. She said someone honest would eventually ask the right questions. He reached into his briefcase and handed me a sealed archive inventory. This lists everything placed into protected storage. I stared at the envelope. Can I open it? He slowly shook his head. Only a court can authorize access. Those were her instructions. Before leaving, he looked directly at me. Your mother planned far more carefully than most people realize. That night, I locked the storage room and placed the envelope inside the metal case before going to bed. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, a loud crash jolted me awake. I rushed into the garage. The side door hung open. Boxes had been knocked onto the floor. Drawers were pulled out, but nothing valuable was missing. Then I noticed one thing that had disappeared. Oliver's empty pet carrier was gone. The responding officer shined his flashlight across the garage before scribbling a few notes onto his report. It looks like a simple break-in, he said. Teenagers maybe, they probably got spooked. They searched through everything, I replied. They didn't take your television, your tools, or your laptop. They took the cat carrier. He gave me a puzzled look. That's unusual, but it's not exactly valuable. No, I thought. Unless someone believed Oliver had led me to something worth stealing. After the police left, I checked the hallway. The storage room door was exactly as I had left it. Nothing inside had been disturbed. Whoever entered my garage either hadn't found what they were looking for or hadn't known where to search. Oliver rubbed against my leg before walking back into the storage room. His eyes settled on one of Mom's journals lying open on the cedar chest. I picked it up. This time, I noticed something I had overlooked before. Several dates had tiny circles drawn around them. 4 dates. 3, 1, 9. I stared at the numbers. 4, 3, 1, 9. I hurried to the black metal case. The lock clicked. It opened. Inside, every document had been arranged with impossible precision. The first folder contained Mom's original signed estate plan, bearing notarized signatures, dated nearly a year before her death. The second held correspondence between her and an estate attorney I had never met. The third contained certified forensic handwriting reports, comparing the authentic will with a forged replacement. Beneath those lay a flash drive, several notarized witness statements, and a thick envelope marked for immediate court filing. Finally, resting on top of everything else, was a letter addressed to me. Natalie, if Ethan is living as though he inherited everything, then he has already crossed the line I believed he would. I did not change my estate before my death. If anyone presents a different will after I am gone, it was not signed by me. My attorneys already know what to do. Follow every instruction exactly. Do not negotiate. Do not warn him. My hands trembled. The evidence was overwhelming. Ethan hadn't manipulated Mom while she was alive. He had waited until after she died. He had knowingly submitted a forged will during probate. Everything Mom suspected had actually happened. At the bottom of the stack was a legal activation letter explaining that the family trust automatically transferred control to the designated beneficiary if fraud involving the estate could be proven with the protected evidence. That beneficiary was me. The letter instructed me to contact one attorney, and one attorney only. I made the call immediately. Within hours, scanned copies of every document had been transmitted under attorney-client privilege. By sunrise, emergency petitions had been drafted. Later that afternoon, I sat quietly in the attorney's office as court filings were electronically submitted. No one expected him to move this quickly, the attorney said. Ironically, his haste strengthens our case. 2 days later, Ethan stood in the foyer of the family mansion, smiling as he finalized paperwork with prospective buyers. The front door opened. A court officer stepped inside. Mr. Ethan Carter. Ethan looked up confidently. Yes. You've been served. The smile disappeared from his face as the officer handed him a thick packet of legal papers. What is this? Ethan demanded. Before anyone answered, another officer entered behind the first. The court has ordered an immediate halt to all estate transfers pending investigation. Hours later, in the emergency probate hearing, Ethan tried to argue that everything had already been settled. The judge raised a hand, glanced down at the newly submitted evidence, then looked directly at him. Mr. Carter. The courtroom fell completely silent. We're going to need you to remain in the courtroom. The emergency probate hearing lasted for weeks. Every document recovered from the storage room was examined. Every signature was compared. Every recording, journal entry, and forensic report was reviewed under oath. Ethan insisted, until the very end, that the replacement will was genuine. It was Mom's final decision, he repeated. Natalie is trying to rewrite history because she's unhappy with what she received. Then the judge nodded toward the attorney representing my mother's estate. You may proceed. A large television screen descended from the courtroom wall. This recording, the attorney said, was made by Margaret Carter 6 months before her passing and stored under sealed legal instructions. He pressed play. My mother's face appeared on the screen. She looked thinner than I remembered, but her smile was unmistakably hers. If you're seeing this, she began softly, Then Oliver found Natalie exactly as I hoped he would. The courtroom became perfectly still. I know my children better than anyone. She paused to catch her breath. Natalie, if you're watching this, thank you. Tears blurred my vision. Thank you for every hospital visit, every meal, every sleepless night, every medication schedule you never complained about. You carried burdens that were never yours alone. I covered my mouth. Across the courtroom, Ethan stared at the screen without moving. Mom continued. I never intended to leave Natalie with nothing. She looked directly into the camera. I left Oliver to her because Oliver always ran to the storage room whenever Natalie came home. I knew she would follow him. Several jurors exchanged glances. If Ethan chose honesty after my death, none of this evidence would ever matter. But if greed guided him, she lowered her eyes for a moment, then he would reveal himself. The attorney paused the recording and presented the remaining evidence. The original signed estate plan. The forensic handwriting analysis proving the submitted will had been forged. The notarized witness statements. The correspondence documenting my mother's concerns months before her death. The legal instructions activating the protected trust if fraud was ever established. Expert witnesses confirmed every signature. The forensic examiner testified that the replacement will had not been written by my mother. The family accountant verified that my mother had warned him something like this might happen. One by one, every piece fit together. The truth was no longer a theory. It was documented fact. The judge's ruling came later that afternoon. The court finds overwhelming evidence that the probate process was corrupted through the submission of a forged testamentary document. He looked directly at Ethan. The previously admitted will is declared void. The room was silent, except for the scratching of the court reporter's keyboard. All property transfers completed under that document are hereby suspended and reversed where legally possible. The mansion sale was canceled. The lake house never changed ownership. Investment accounts were frozen. Business shares reverted to the protected trust. The probate estate was reopened under my mother's authentic estate plan. Within days, investigators began examining the forgery itself. Civil lawsuits followed. Criminal fraud, forgery, and perjury investigations soon replaced the congratulatory phone calls Ethan had enjoyed only weeks earlier. Relatives who had congratulated him and quietly judged me suddenly avoided his calls. Several visited my home instead. I should have known, my aunt admitted with tears in her eyes. Your mother adored you. I simply nodded. There was nothing left to prove. The attorney who had remained silent during the original reading met me privately afterward. I'm sorry, he said. Your mother's legal instructions were explicit. Until the protected evidence surfaced, I could not reveal its existence. I understand. He smiled gently. She trusted you completely. Months later, I officially became trustee of the family trust, owner of the investment companies, and steward of the charitable foundation my grandparents had started decades earlier. For the first time in my life, I made decisions without wondering whether Ethan approved. I restored my mother's home instead of selling it. One wing became a caregiver resource center that offered financial assistance and temporary relief for families caring for seriously ill loved ones. Another portion of the foundation expanded grants for local animal rescues. It felt appropriate. After all, an old gray cat had carried my mother's final act of love across the finish line. Oliver spent his days sleeping beside the same living room window where Mom used to read every afternoon. Sometimes he wandered into the storage room, now cleaned and carefully organized. The hidden evidence was gone. In its place were framed family photographs, handwritten recipes, childhood drawings, and the journals that reminded me who my mother truly was. I no longer measured my worth by inheritance, approval, or comparison. I finally understood that my mother had never questioned my value. She had simply waited for the truth to protect itself. One quiet evening, Oliver curled into my lap as the sun disappeared beyond the backyard garden. I closed the storage room door for the last time, not to hide another secret, but because my mother's final gift had already changed everything exactly as she intended.